here is the topic today. I'm going to be joined by Kristie Overstreet, and the topic is sexual communication 101, how to actually talk about it. Aha, there's Kristie now. Hi, thanks for joining.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So where are you coming to us from at the moment?
At the moment, I'm right outside of Jacksonville, Florida, up in northeast part of Florida. I just stop and think a minute and like, where am I at right now at this time?
You're
I'm
like,
in the great state of Florida, but it's kind of cold today, so
yeah.
it's a little wild.
And given our line of work, it could be like, well, where am I at right now? Like physically or emotionally,
Yes.
spiritually, where's my head? Where's my heart? I don't know, who knows? But yeah, I'm so happy that you could join. And because I think this is it's a huge topic that people struggle with. Not only how do they communicate, just how they feel about day-to-day things in life, but then when we're talking about intimacy and that vulnerability piece,
right,
it gets all the harder. So, but I know you do a lot of work around helping people. I'd love for you to tell us more, but around helping people to really start from within, taking accountability first in order to really understand kind of what their needs and wants are first and foremost, as opposed to it always being about maybe just the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. This started when I was working with so many clients, as well as my own personal relationships and working with clients. And just that wanting the other person to change, whether it was a toxic relationship I was in, I was like, oh, they need to change. He needs to do something different. It's not me, right? Or clients saying that, hey, this other person needs to change. I don't need to do anything differently. And I started realizing, wait a minute, that's just really shirking responsibility. And when I did that for my personal self and said, you know what, there's some things about me that I needed to change if I want to get a healthy relationship. I just can't sit here and like twiddle my thumbs and expect this person who's healthy to come to me. And so I looked inward and I said, what do I need to fix about myself, the way I think, the way I behave, and definitely some of my feelings around topics. And when I started changing that, I noticed I stopped putting up with unhealthy behavior from partners. And I started acting a lot healthier for myself. And that's when this concept of fixing myself first versus waiting on the other person to change came out. And so I did it personally. I tried it with a lot of my clients, and we started seeing those changes happen, because if not, we're just sitting around waiting, wishing, and really stacking up a lot of resentment because they're not going to change. We have to be the one to make that change first and foremost.
Yeah. Well, and I know a lot of, my work with clients, just also being a somatic psychologist, is just, are you even aware of what's going on within you, like in your physical body, your emotional body, and how much of it starts really there? Because if we don't even know, if we're not even connected to ourselves, in our mind and body, then how can we articulate that? And, that's, I think, kind of where it starts, from the bottom up, really. How, like, what am I feeling? Can I tap into that? Because that's step number one. And then to go to that next step of then talking about it. And I know you have on your Instagram too, I've seen a post with just different tips as far as how to then express yourself, finding the right timing. And so do you want to tell us a little bit? I'm happy to jump in too, but
well, the thing about it is you were talking about figuring out what we're feeling, and it's really easy for us to kind of shirk off, oh, well, I'm feeling, or I'm tired of feeling, or maybe you have a partner that's like, I don't want to deal with feelings. But if we don't, what do we really have left in us? Because our feelings, as you know, they come from how we think and believe about situations and what we're experiencing within ourselves. And so to expect our partner to just sit down and say, okay, let's talk about feelings, that's not how it works, or at least it's not how it's worked in my relationships, right? But opening up and saying, hey, this is what's on my mind. Can I run this past you? Can I share this as what's bothering me? And it's almost like we're asking permission to approach a conversation, especially those hard ones, versus going, we need to talk. That is the worst, right? When you sit down and you hear this, we've got to talk about something. If my partner comes to me and says, we need to talk, my red flags are up. I'm probably going to get defensive. I'm just waiting for something to come at me that's probably my fault, versus when he says, hey, can I run this past you? Do you have a couple minutes? I'm going to be a lot more open. And so he does a great job modeling that for me, as well as me doing that for him, because the hard topics, it's really easy to get away from those and not deal with them. and avoid them, right? And that, you know how many problems that causes in our relationship when we avoid talking about those hard topics.
Yeah, avoidance. I mean, avoidance is the number one strategy, I think, yeah, around these challenging issues related to relationships, and especially related to sex, because, you know, everybody has their stories of whether it be guilt or shame or judgment around their body, around their desires, you know, what they do and don't like, what they should or shouldn't like. And so that's where I think it gets, so much trickier of, you know, how can we, it's this matter of how can we tell somebody what we want or need in the bedroom without it then, bringing up blame or defensiveness. You know, and then also that I think women in particular, people, you know, socialized as female, then it's all the harder, I think, for them to say, hey, you know what? I don't love that. I do love this. How about we give this a try? Because it can be perceived then as, you know, being selfish, or that you're, you know, maybe afraid of then the other person not wanting to be with you or rejecting you, which I mean, rejection is a fear that can happen, you know, for sort of all genders and non-binary. But I think, you know, for females in particular, it's so hard.
Well, we want to avoid conflict because we care about our partner, or most of us do, and we don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to see their self-esteem take a hit if we say, okay, when you do this, I don't really like it. We're worried our partner is going to say, oh, I'm doing something wrong. Or when I do it with other people, they don't complain, or they haven't complained in the past. What's wrong with you? So we're also fear of conflict, but then that finger pointing back to us with that defense, you know, that comes up from that. So it can be really difficult to have those conversations. And what I see so many people struggle with is not just starting to have that conversation, because when that conversation starts, it can be like, well, I don't know what I like, right? A lot of women will say, I don't know what I want. Who knows? Like, I don't know. I haven't thought about this. And again, we don't raise kids to look at pleasure and what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And so I ended up working with so many women that don't even know where to start.
Yeah, like what do I want is like, that's, I always think of that, those are like really powerful words. What do I want? Because then it can really go down this path of, well, what if I, you know, do I deserve it? Or if I put it out there, will I then maybe not even get it? Or, you know, if I do, is that asking for too much? It's so loaded, but it is like really a profound foundation that we need to start it, because we all are deserving of receiving what we want from the relationship, you know, and intimacy. Does it mean we always get it? But maybe not, but we certainly aren't going to get what we want if we don't even start to ask for it. I think there's a line I heard, like, you can't receive the pleasure that you don't ask for. Right.
Right. It's got to start somewhere. And that's where it's really easy to wait on a partner to say, oh, let's talk about this. And they're probably not going to. It has to go back to us and our own personal accountability of what do we want and what do we like. And we don't have to have it fully flushed out or worked out ahead of time. We can figure it out in a relationship. We can figure it out single. But we have to know what we like, what we don't like, and start having those conversations and know that we are deserving of that. And nothing's going to change if we don't. And that's where that personal accountability, I think, is really important. And one of the approaches that I really like, and I'm sure you appreciate it too, is this whole self approach with your somatic work of, we have to look at our emotional self, our sexual self, recreational self, spiritual self, all these different parts of who we are, and say, where are my needs? What are my wants? And how do I figure those out, and then get comfortable with those, and then be able to have a conversation with a partner, or even a future partner if you're single at this time.
Right. Yeah. And I also think approaching it from this place of curiosity, like, hey, what do you say we give this a try? Or I've been curious about this, or I've noticed maybe, you know, when I'm by myself, I've enjoyed this. What do you say we give this a try? So it doesn't have to be this absolute or command. It's like, can we be, you know, more curious and playful about it? As opposed to it being about, you know, we must do this or that, but an exploratory process together, I think, is always well received. Right?
Yeah, it is, because it lightens it, because the sex is heavy enough, or our expectations, or I like to call it sex expectations, right?
Yeah.
That we have of ourselves, of what we're supposed to be doing, or what we're supposed to be performing on our partner, or whatever comes up around that. And it's heavy and it's pressured, especially in long-term relationships. Short-term hookups, short-term relationships, they're a lot more fun in the sense of they're not long-term, they're not living that day to day. When it gets serious and you get in those long-term relationships, things get stagnant, things can get boring, things can get redundant. It's easy for that to happen. It's not that a couple's flawed that's going through that. That's really normal, because the person that we're going through every struggle and crisis with, we're also supposed to have this like high attraction to them, and we live with one another, and some of that attraction changes. But that's where the funness, like you said, comes in. That if we really think about, are we having fun, I would say outside the bedroom? What are we doing for hobbies, shared and individual? And one of the things that I talk about in the program that I love is turning that recreational intimacy, that funness that we have and that recreational connection, it can turn into physical connection. Because we're having fun, when we're laughing and things are a little bit more carefree, only if it's a short amount of time, you're going to be more apt to want to physically connect with your partner. They go hand in hand.
Right. I mean, for sure, there's so many ways in which it all starts outside of the bedroom. If you're able to assert yourself about where you want to go for dinner that night, or, what tile you want as you renovate the bathroom. I mean, it starts in those different areas, because if you don't have that connection to yourself and if you have a fear of conflict in all other areas, then of course it's going to be all the harder to say kind of your yeses and your nos in the bedroom. I mean, I think when we were talking about that question of like, what do I want? And women in particular having a hard time with that. I think also they can have a hard time with like, what do I not want? And how is it that I can also reclaim my no? And that even though that might be hard for them, like I have a right to that limit and boundary as well. And so I think, all of those things they start really in the day to day. It's sort of like that saying that, foreplay starts like as soon as the last sexual encounter ended.
Yes.
So your yeses and your nos, and sort of really being able to find that, like my somatic approach in the body and with bodyfulness, and a lot of what you talk about too with the self accountability and owning that, I think is like such, that's one of the things I really like about your work, and kind of the ways our work both, really overlaps, is from within. It's an inside job. Yes. It starts there.
Yes. And it's so much easier to blame our partner than go within, right? Because we go within, it might bring up some stuff that makes us like, gosh, what if it doesn't work with my partner? Maybe I'm not as attracted or connected to them as I thought I was. Again, another easy way to avoid it. But when we kind of go back to what you said, which I think is so important, the importance of no's just as important as the yeses are, because your partner needs to know what not to do so they can make more space of what to do. And one thing I encourage people to do is to do solo sessions, find out what touch feels good for you, whether it's masturbation, whether it's mutual masturbation, or play that's not focused on that kind of idea of penetrative sex, or however you define sex to be. You got to know what you like and give yourself that permission to know that, so you can have those discussions. And I tell people, like, you want to ask what the no's are. You want to know what the limits are. You want to know what to stay away from, because that's how you're going to get the other pleasure, by avoiding that.
Yeah, right. I think that it connecting to your own self and body, and the thing is, it's always evolving too, because we aren't we're with time, as we as we age, or as we know ourselves better, or we know the other person better. It's sort of like there's such a need for those check-ins, because maybe what you both were into 5 years ago or 5 months ago, I mean, that is bound to evolve. And I mean, all relationships do evolve. And so I think like kind of having those check-ins, and maybe not seeing it as this big deal, like we have to have the talk with a capital T,
right?
But just like, hey, wanted to check in. How have you been feeling about this? Are you enjoying, this, or have you been? I've noticed that maybe you haven't been as interested. But again, trying to do that in a way that's not like blaming, like there's something bad or wrong with what you've noticed, and in the shift of the rhythm of the physical intimacy.
That's crucial, because just as our relationships change, like you said, we as individuals change. What I might have liked or not liked in my 20s is differently where I'm at in my 40s. And the way I was having sex at that time is totally different than how I was having sex at this time, because of self-growth, personal dynamics, relationship dynamics, and really figuring out myself. That's why I tell women, like, it gets better as you get older, right? Because you start figuring out what you like and what you don't like, and give yourself that space to evolve that. But then also within that relationship, asking, is there anything you're thinking about trying? Or, hey, I saw this and want to know what you thought about it. Or so-and-so brought this article up. What do you think about that? It's almost like testing the waters to see that openness from your partner, to see if they're open to having that discussion or not. And when you do that, it can be really scary, because your partner can be like, oh, what's wrong with you? Or I'm not enough, which is a big one, right? Like saying, oh, you're bringing this up, that means I'm not doing something enough. It doesn't mean that you're not doing something enough. It just means we have to approach life from a sexual buffet. I like the term sexual buffet because it gives us this option. I know.
Yeah,
It's
it's
good,
making
right?
me hungry right now.
Good. We go, well, definitely, COVID's put a wrench in it, but we go to a buffet, we get a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we know certain things we're in the mood for or not in the mood for. We need to, approach sex the same way. We can't just have like one type of sex. It can be different. You can have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and not get in that routine. But when we do that, we almost open ourselves up to say, okay, what is out there? What can we bring to the table of this buffet? And what can I do to kind of get comfortable with that? And which things do I want seconds of? And which things I'm like, yeah, I don't ever want to eat that or try that again. So having that openness really gives us that permission to talk about fantasies, exploration, things we like, things that we don't like, and new things that come out.
Right. Yeah. Like it's similar to also when I try to encourage people to think of like movement as medicine, and just like we need a variety of food groups, we need a variety of movement. And like you're saying, the buffet and variety of ways to connect to intimacy. Yeah, I think that is so true. And yeah, I do think people can get really stuck and maybe too, because there's been this message of like, what sex is, it means that it's going to be missionary style. You have the lights out, and it's always, you only should be interested in one person. Like I know a big topic that a lot of people, different clients I've talked to about is they might want to open up the intimacy. They might want to have an open relationship, or even to bring up that I know can be really scary because of how the other person might perceive it as them, rejection or violating their trust or not being interested in them. Have you encountered that with any of your clients as well?
Oh, yeah. I've been working since I became a therapist for many years with people that have different types of relationship structures, and open relationships is definitely one of those. And I've had people come in saying, hey, I want to try it, I don't know how to bring it up. And I've had people come in and say, like, my partner brought it up, I'm not open, or we want to do this in a really ethical way that feels good for both of us. And so, just approaching that conversation can be really tough. So what I tell people to do is, you definitely want to bring it up to your partner in a way that's not saying that they're not doing something good enough, or that you're wanting something different. It can be like, we are such vast sexual beings. This is something I want to talk about and get your thoughts on, and see what that might look like, not look like from your end. And couples that do this successfully, or relationship dynamics that do it successfully, are those that come in and say, we want to do this. We want to make sure our communication trust is tight, top notch. We've got it down. And let's talk about what the boundaries look like, what the checks. So we do a checklist and all this to help both of them kind of build this open relationship they're looking for from a very trusting place. Where people get it wrong is when they just go out there and say, I'm going to open up my relationship, but our trust isn't good, our communication isn't good, and I'm going to do this to fix the relationship. And that's where it goes sideways so often.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's another example too of where really coming from a place of curiosity, and just being like, what would it be like if we consider doing this? Not that it's like, this is what I must do, or like you're saying, the avoidance. I mean, I think people just go and do it and hide and keep it a secret. But I think that exploring of how it might be, I think some people might assume, well, it would destroy the relationship, whereas the other person's thinking it might actually enhance it. But I think just having a conversation about, what are the ways it could help things, but it also could make things a little bit more challenging. But yeah, having somebody else who's just open to like meeting you where you're at, and just and being, exploring and kind of imagining the possibility, rather than staying stagnant and just kind of the same thing. And also, I know another issue that I've run into with a lot of couples is that that they don't communicate about the fact that maybe one person really defines a successful, like good sex is there must be an orgasm, there must be climax, and for the other person there might be challenges around that. And so that they feel like it's so focused on that, then that also can kind of shut down the communication. So I know I've tried to help people. I feel like relationship and sex therapists in particular, we're probably the least focused on making sure people have an orgasm, because we see just how much people really, that's all they care about. And miss so much along the way of the sensuality and things like that. So sometimes I've also tried to help couples talk more around that how can we just be in the experience and in the process, and how that can be so bonding and connecting as well, rather than just the getting to the finish line.
Yeah, it's like the finish line can be very disappointing if you don't enjoy the process to get there, and the pressure that we put on, especially women, and men too, but especially women, put on having to achieve this orgasm and get to this place. I mean, guys most time feel like they're circus bears, they're having to perform, right? So there's all this performance anxiety that goes along with women and men of how they're supposed to show up and reach this end destination, when the most pleasurable part of it is going through it, the process of it, the buildup of it, the foreplay of it. And if you're not enjoying that, you're definitely missing out, and you're probably not even really enjoying end product if you are missing everything that leads up to it. And that's where we end up with a lot of sexual dysfunction, especially in men, right? That pressure. And then for women, feeling like I'm not doing something right. I'm not having an orgasm every time, as if it's supposed to be this, magical gift that's given by their partner. And we know that's not how it works, right? But this pressure on getting to a place and not enjoying the process, it can be really difficult. I think the other thing that goes along with it is so many women, as you know, the clients you work with, they struggle with being in their head, right? They can't focus. They can't get in the moment. They're thinking of the chore list, or I've just got to get through this. And that idea of just getting through this can be excruciating. Nobody wants to have to be in that place, right?
Right. Well, and I think that it's a body trauma all its own, that whole just sort of grin and bear it and get through it. And I mean, I've worked with people in which time and time again, every sexual experience, it was an imprint of trauma on their body to just sort of freeze mode and get through it. And for the majority of partners, they don't want that from the other person. That's the last thing that they would want, is to think that their partner's in pain and is their nervous system is stressed out like that. So I think that's where the sooner that we can speak up to, what we do and don't want, then the sooner that we're preventing some of that body trauma to be lodged, that then you associate with sex. And then that leads to, of course, not wanting to be touched even, then people can even flinch just at somebody wanting to give them a hug because they're afraid it's going to lead to sex, and they associate sex then with the pain, and we're, as human beings, we're meant to avoid pain and seek pleasure. But if we don't know how to say that something feels painful, we just absorb that, and that doesn't help with the experience at all.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's what such a big part of it is, and that's why I'm so excited. I know I don't want to put it out there, but your book's on pre-order, and I'm so excited about it, right? With it being there, talking about that experience that women go through, and that difficulty they have when it comes to showing up for sex. And I think that's what's so powerful about the somatic work that you do around that, because it has such an effect. We think about the physical aspect, but it has such an effect on the emotional aspect of it, right?
Right. And our body memory. I mean, I think that we can hold and store body memory, and in our, in our tissues and in our emotional body, as far as our nervous system reactivity. And so people might in their mind say, well, like, of course I want to, have sex with this person or my partner, but then their body might have a different story. It might, and if we aren't connected to the two, that's when there can feel such shame or confusion of like, well, I know I should or I want to, but there's this wall up. And so I think that the sooner people can communicate, what their body's telling them that's happening, and that'll really help to heal and soothe the parts of the body that immediately might get blocked and close up as soon as there's touch. I mean, touch is so powerful. It can really take us to these places that are from our past, just the way how we're touched, even going back to our childhood or our first sexual experience. So touch can bring up, it's just such a language all of its own that it can bring up. But I'm excited for my book. It doesn't come out till the end of July, but you can pre-order it now, and I have some gifts around that. And I also wanted, before we wrap up here soon, give a shout out to your podcast. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. It's Fix Yourself First. And it's the whole principle is what we've been talking about, of focusing on what can I do to change, to see a change in my relationships, because we know our partners will not change. We have to accept that they're not going to change. But if we change the unhealthy parts and things we need to change in ourselves, it will flow and create some type of change in that relationship and our partners. The scary thing about this is, if this happens, we may decide we've outgrown them. We may figure out, wow, this doesn't match where I was at 5 years ago, where I'm at now. And if I really look at myself, it means this may not work out. So there's all kinds of things we do in order to avoid that work. So the podcast brings in guests and some of my tips as well in different solo episodes to teach people how to focus on being the self-change within yourself to get those healthy relationships you want, and to take that accountability and to set boundaries, work on self-esteem, work on your sexual self-esteem, which is really important, and really build that relationship that you desire.
Yes, yes, yes. I love it. I think that just that's feeling of empowerment that can come from even, you know, knowing what we want and need and saying it is huge. So I thank you so much for all of your work that you're doing, and love your Instagram and all the tidbits that you share on there. And
thank you.
we'll have to do this again, because I feel like there's still so many different aspects to intimacy, physical and emotional intimacy, that we could break down. And but yeah, thank you for coming on today. And if people have questions, you can, you know, send us a direct message. And but yeah, let's do this again. And until then, everybody connect to what you want and need, and practice saying it.